Well, the Democrats' infatuation in destroying Donald Trump has been overshadowed somewhat today by fears expressed by the FBI that in conjunction with next week's presidential inauguration, there could be mass armed protests across the country, in particular in the capital. Meanwhile, the redundant process of a second impeachment vote against Trump is expected to proceed, with Democrats still unable to allow Trump to escape punishment for last week's storming of the Capitol building. Joining me now is Brad Polumbo, contributor for the Washington Examiner. Thank you so much for your time, Brad. Where's Donald?
Thanks.
Where's he gone? I haven't seen him. I know he can't go on Twitter. I know he's off Facebook. Where is he?
Well, he's holed up in the White House now, and apparently, according to his staff, he is increasingly withdrawn and agitated. And we just have to hope that he's able to keep it together for this last week here, because, like you said, he's not able to speak to his base. He's not able to use social media the way he always has. And that might actually be a bad thing in that, like you mentioned, there's going to be all these protests around the country. It'd be really great if President Trump could put out a tweet right now telling people, your right is to peaceful protest, go out and do that, but do not engage in any violence, do not cross the line. But he can't do that right now because he's banned. So
what's the FBI predicting may happen next week?
So they've got all sorts of concerns, just like they did about this Capitol attack. And unfortunately, they had a lot of intelligence in advance about the Capitol attack that things could get violent and that people were planning on bringing weapons and explosives. And it wasn't really taken seriously enough. And they really, I think, failed. That's why you saw the head of the Capitol Police actually offer their resignation, because it's something of a scandal here that the way that they, in the moment, the police officers handled it as best they could and really put their lives on the line. But there was a definite failure of the government and of the police to properly approach the security threat the first time. So I hope they don't make that mistake again. Yeah,
you can't imagine they would be outnumbered next week. So are we thinking that this is United States wide? It's not necessarily just at, Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, it's not just Washington, D.C., and it's not just the Capitol building. I believe that in dozens and dozens of states, there's expected to be protests and rallies. And, maybe many of those protests will be peaceful. You're sure hoping people have every right to do that. They have every right to be upset and unhappy with the inauguration of Joe Biden, for sure. But I just hope that people in these many rallies, they make sure to not engage in what we saw last week at the Capitol.
What's your feeling about the pile-on Donald, despite the fact he's only got a handful of days left? Do you think that this feeds the hate against the Democrats, against the system, and supports Trump, and so therefore could lead to armed protest?
Yeah, I think that the purge of Donald Trump from social media is extremely disturbing. I mean, it's disheartening to think that a bunch of left-wing people who control Silicon Valley have the right to essentially erase a mainstream American political figure from the digital public square. Now, to be clear, it's not really a legal issue because they're private companies, so they're not bound by a First Amendment here. But it's alarming, and Trump supporters and Republicans and conservatives increasingly feel marginalized. They feel like the kind of dominant left-wing cultural society tells them they're ignorant or they're racist or they're bigots and doesn't care about them, doesn't care about their problems. And that's not going to go away by banning people or silencing people. So I think all of this backlash, people were right to criticize President Trump, don't get me wrong, for how he handled the Capitol attack. But all this kind of purge and backlash, at this point, it only serves to kind of foment the division that's causing all these problems.
I couldn't agree more. Very quickly, looking at what may happen next week, you just wonder whether the Democrats are wasting their time. They know they're wasting their time going forward with a vote on impeachment. They don't have the numbers. They don't have the time.
Yeah, they don't have the time. And actually, there's even talk about doing the impeachment after Joe Biden is president or waiting till after Joe Biden's first 100 days so they can impeach Trump after they do Joe Biden's early agenda, because apparently that's more important. And all of this makes it look like a political exercise or a partisan exercise, when really it should be a question of constitutional duty and of objective norms. And that doesn't really seem like it is going to be so far.
Brad Polumbo, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.
Live there from Washington, D.C.